Hey everyone, the two big Godfall updates are finally here. Both the free Lightbringer update and the Fire and Darkness DLC expansion launched alongside the PlayStation 4 release, and like most people, I was excited to see how current play games would improve and grow the game. There's also a ton of other updates like Matchmaking and a boatload of bug fixes, so there's a lot to go over today. If you do enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more gaming news, reviews, and discussions. With that said, let's get into it. And before we go any further, I'm sorry if the audio sounds off. It is like 100 degrees here, and I had to record in a different spot than usual, so that's why the audio might sound a little off. So first, let's go over the DLC expansion Fire and Darkness, because it actually leads into the story for the Lightbringer update. It's included in the Ascended and Deluxe editions, and it is also available for purchase for Standard Edition owners for $20, although that will depend on your region. The expansion adds in a brand new map, the Fire Realm, along with 4 story missions, 5 hunts, and 2 giant boss battles. It kicks off right at the end of the base game after Macros' death. Your Sanctum is assaulted by another Valyrian knight who was presumed to be dead. He is looking to fulfill the prophecy of Kazmira and attacks the 7th Sanctum, stealing her light. Orin, concerned for her safety, chases him to the Fire Realm so he can restore her light and stop him from unleashing the darkness. To my pleasant surprise, the expansion actually has a lot more cutscenes and story focus than the base game. You meet more characters along the way this time and even have your allies fight alongside you in certain missions. I had always wondered what happened to your buddies who were with you in the opening cutscenes of the game, so it was a nice touch to see them back and participate in the story. Some of the voice acting leaves a lot to be desired, and the story is still pretty basic, but it's absolutely a step in the right direction, and I enjoyed the story experience more than I did in the base game. Fire Realm map is the largest in the game to date and had a good variety of visuals while staying true to its theme. And like in the base game, graphically speaking, it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm not one to gush over graphics because I will take gameplay over graphics every time, but damn, it has some of the best looking skyboxes I've ever seen in a game. As far as the level design goes, it's more open than the air and water realms, but not quite as open as the earth realm. Since it's such a huge region, it does have varied sections that are more linear, and others that have spacious room to explore. They added in some new, and I use this term lightly, puzzles to solve to find hidden treasure chests, which did give the exploration some variety. The problem was that since I was already max level, there really wasn't any reason at all for me to explore, considering everything I found was worse than the gear I already had equipped. For that reason, along with a few other things that I'll go over in a minute, I think the experience will be better for brand new players who visit the zone while leveling up. There's quite a few new enemies to face, and for the most part, they felt really well designed. They actually do make you approach some encounters differently, which was something I enjoyed. There's a gargoyle enemy that flies up into the air, and the only way to get him down is to throw your shield at him, or if that's on cooldown, you need to time your parry properly to stun him. We really didn't have anything like that in the base game, so it was a welcome addition. And the other new enemies I can see being quite challenging when you face them in Ascended Tower of Trials or high-level Dreamstones, because some will attack you relentlessly. The problem I faced was that, again, I was max level with fully upgraded gear, so I blew through the enemies, sometimes one-shotting them. This went for the bosses too, since I had a build focused on single target damage, I melted them down in seconds. So again, I think it will be more enjoyable for people who get to play through the campaign and expansion all at the same time. Speaking of the bosses, we got several new ones. Most of them were of the mid-level boss variety, but they did have some interesting mechanics. One had a hook that dragged you to him so you could bash your face in, and another set up a small force field around himself, forcing you to go toe-to-toe with him in very close quarters. Outside of those bosses, there were 2 big-scale boss battles, and I felt like this is where the expansion really shined. Well, again, they were less challenging due to me being max level. I can see their fights being really difficult when I face them in Dreamstones. My only complaint is that one of the bosses was gigantic, and while the actual boss mechanics were really fun, I ran into some obnoxious camera issues due to the size of the boss. His leg would block my character so I couldn't see what I was doing, and other times the camera would swing wildly if I was locked onto him. But this is something they can easily fix in a patch, so I hope they do. I obviously don't want to spoil all of the encounter mechanics, but I think the final boss fight might have been my favorite boss fight in the game to date. Finally, if you do buy the expansion, the new enemies will be added to Dreamstones, Ascended Tower of Trials, and the new Lightbringer mode. Dreamstones and Ascended Tower of Trials in particular could get very repetitive, so for longtime players, the new enemies should be a breath of fresh air to give those modes some much needed variety. The only issue I see is that I'm not sure what happens when you try to group with a friend who doesn't have the expansion, but if you play solo, that's kind of a moot point. Overall, I think it did take what Godfall was and made it better. Not much better, but it was a step in the right direction. Like I said, the experience will be better for newer players, but at least for returning players, you will get new enemies added to the endgame modes. Also, when it comes to loot, I didn't find a single thing in the entire expansion that was an upgrade for my character, which was disappointing. Of course, I'll find new upgrades when I fight the enemies in the endgame modes, but outside of the story, it made the campaign feel a bit hollow considering Godfall is a game mostly based around loot. And don't expect anything too crazy from the story. It's better than what was in the base game, but it's still very simplistic. However, I see a good foundation here now that can be improved in future story updates and expansions. It's also pretty short, and everything including all of the hunts could be done in a single sitting. It's a live service-y type of game, so the campaign is really just there to give some sort of structure to the endgame loot grind. So whether or not that's a positive or negative will be up to your personal preferences. So that brings us to the Lightbringer update, which adds in a new endgame mode alongside several gameplay changes and fixes. First off, we got Matchmaking, which is a good news, bad news situation. Good news is that I had zero issues with matchmaking and the sessions I played ran very smoothly without any lag. The bad news is that matchmaking can be only used for Ascended Tower Trials and Lightbringer mode. I'm not gonna lie, I expected a bit more, although it is still technically in beta, so hopefully they will add in more matchmaking options. Especially for high-level Dreamstones, a group is really nice to have, and I'm not sure why they didn't add an option in for it. Before the expansion released, I imagined we would be able to use the matchmaking for everything. For new players, it would have been nice to just set your session to public and allow people to drop in and play through the campaign with you. Luckily, the Godfall community is extremely active, and there's PSN groups you can join to find people to play with, but considering it's a co-op focused game, I do really feel like you shouldn't have to use outside sources to find people to play with. I saw in an interview that they actually didn't plan to add in matchmaking, but since it was such a heavily requested fan feature, they decided to expedite its creation. It's great that they are listening to the community, and it seems like a lot of people were excited for it. But what we got did seem like a little less than the bare minimum, and I do hope it's improved over time. So that brings us to the Lightbringer endgame mode. I did mention that it has some story elements to it in my update video last week, and it does, but it connects to the end of the Fire and Darkness DLC, so I don't want to say how it connects to the story so I don't spoil anything for anyone. From what I've seen so far, it seems like some people dislike it, but overall most people enjoy it, and personally, I had a ton of fun with the mode. In the developer interview that previewed the mode, it was described as survival mode, which definitely had me intrigued, and I do think that that was a good description. In this mode, darkness has infected the 4 realms, and it's your job alongside your group members to use light to quell the darkness. I was surprised at how different the zones felt, and at times they felt unrecognizable to the point where they felt like entirely new areas. There's several features to this mode that can cause it to be rather challenging. Since the areas are covered in darkness, you have to find beacons of light and guide the sanctum to a light amplifier to stop the encroaching darkness. When you stand outside the beacons of light, you start to lose health, so this mode forces you to constantly be on the move and find your objectives. Like in other modes, you can do optional side objectives to increase your rewards, but having to always watch your health does add in an additional layer of difficulty. Once you find what's called a dark tear, you fight waves of enemies, and once you've defeated them, you escort the sanctum back to the light amplifier. You can do this multiple times to increase the amount of loot you get, but of course there's a risk-reward layer to it due to you only having a limited amount of continues if you do. Once you activate the light amplifier, you will essentially have to face a gauntlet of enemies. Those enemies drop light crystals, and once you gather enough, the sanctum will be able to purge the darkness for the time being. Once you finish, you will be rewarded with a newly added cursed loot, which can be incredibly powerful. Cursed loot, when equipped, will actually decrease several stats at first, and will require you to complete an objective to cleanse it and to turn it into awakened gear. The objectives can range from kill 5 bosses in Ascended Tower of Trials, to kill 200 level 55 plus enemies in Dreamstones, so this gives you an additional incentive to continue playing those modes as well. Once cleansed, the awakened gear can become some of the most powerful loot in the game, and I've already seen other players create some brand new builds around it. Once you cleanse items, you can then apply those curses to your Lightbringer runs, which will actually allow you to get bonus loot, but of course in turn it makes your run more difficult. I thought this mode was fun, but my only complaint is that I actually had difficulty seeing what was going on in larger battles during the Gauntlet section. Enemies are shrouded in darkness, and everything outside the light beacons is also covered in darkness. Combine this with the insane amount of particle effects, and I literally could not see my character, making it impossible to parry or dodge attacks. This is something that can easily be fixed if the particle effects are turned down though, so I'm sure they will tweak this over time. I did run into a few bugs and glitches as well, mostly the same ones I ran into that I spoke about in my Godfall review. However, the one new one I faced was when my character started floating up into the air and my controls became unresponsive. Enemies were still able to hit me though, so I had to die, which wasted a continuing my Lightbringer run. Minor stuff, but I do hope they patch out some of those issues. This update also brought in a number of other changes and fixes. We'd be here all day if I went through the entire list, so I'll link the patch notes down below, but I will go over some of the key changes. For starters, there's a ton of new loot in the Lightbringer update and the Fire Realm DLC, including a new amulet and charm that both have double primary stats. There's also 86 new Valor Plate cosmetics to collect, something I felt the base game was missing. While the common and rare variants felt like simple color palette swaps, I thought the epic and legendary skins looked fantastic. This of course will depend on your personal preferences, but it is nice to have additional things to grind and collect once you've maxed out your character. They also increased the chance to get certain loot drops, added in more stats to the detailed character stat screen, and fixed a laundry list of bugs and glitches. I'm glad they fixed so many issues, although I do hope they continue work on fixing them, because as I mentioned, I did run into several issues while playing. So the bottom line is, if you like Godfall, it's more Godfall. And I do think it's been improved and the game is on the right track. I thought Lightbringer mode was really fun, and having another realm and new enemies to face will help with some of the repetitiveness. Unfortunately, I was unable to test out the PlayStation 4 version since I bought the game physically for PlayStation 5, and I can't afford to rebuy the game right now. However, I do like what they did for the PlayStation 4 release. They lowered the price to $60, and that gives you the base game along with the Fire and Darkness DLC. For those who bought the standard version on PS5, it's $20 for the Fire and Darkness DLC. It's really hard to say if that's too much for what we got, considering there's really no standards for DLC prices. I've seen quote-unquote season passes that cost between $20 and $40 that give you nothing more than a few skins, and then on the other end we have the Witcher 3 Blood and Wine DLC that was $15, so it's all over the place. Personally, I think it's just slightly overpriced. $15 would have been better, but if you've been playing Godfall nonstop, I do think it's worth buying. Considering it's a small development team that is mostly working remotely, I'm amazed at what they've been able to accomplish. Just from other developer interviews, I've seen creating big boss battles is extremely difficult and requires a lot of development time, and a large portion of the team has to work on it. Like I said in my original review, it's a mid-sized team with a small budget. You do have to keep your expectations in check. But considering they released a game like this working through the past year and a half remotely, I'm impressed and rooting for the game, and I hope it continues to improve. I guess now the question is, for the people who are on the fence about the game, is now the right time to jump in? I think you might still want to wait for a small sale, but it's not a bad time to get into the game. I think they are headed in the right direction, and after one more patch that adds in a decent amount of content, the game will be in a healthy place. And the developers have confirmed there will be more content coming in the future, and they may be putting out a new roadmap soon. I've seen a lot of people really enjoy the game, and Lightbringer mode especially adds in a nice layer of challenge. I do think there's a few more fixes that need to be made, like better inventory management, bug fixes, and matchmaking for Dreamstones, but there's certainly fun to be had if you enjoy these styles of games. With all the new loot, there's so many different potential builds, and if you like theory crafting and min-maxing, this might be the ideal game for you. So I'm curious, if you had your eye on the game for a while, was this DLC enough to make you want to play it? Also, if you've been playing on the PS4, let me know down in the comments how it's running on there. Anyways, I have a few videos planned over the next week, including a channel update, my Back 4 Blood beta impressions, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla Siege of Paris review. After that, outside of Aliens Fireteam Elite, it's a bit slow in the new releases department until the fall rush, so I have some Platinum reviews and discussion videos planned that I am really excited about. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share my content. Everything you do really helps out the channel. Thanks so much for watching, see you all in the next video.